I want to say thank y'all for coming out here and listening to folks running for office. Being this close to Tacoma's beaches, the best kept secret in Florida. There's much better things you guys could be doing than sitting here listening to somebody as old as me talk to you guys. There's a lot of confusion about my name, so we'll start there. My legal name is Matt the Welder. I changed it legally, and some folks ask why. That's a silly reason. When I ran for county commissioner, I had about 260,000 people that followed me on the internet and knew me as Matt the Welder, and nobody knew who Matthew Taylor was. And when I filled out a nickname affidavit, they kicked it back and they said, you can't have that nickname affidavit. It should have said Matt, parentheses, the Welder Taylor. So I said, well, how do I make sure they can't kick out a nickname affidavit? And now that I have 1 million people almost that follow me on the internet that only know me as Matt the Welder, how do I make sure they can see Matt the Welder on the internet or on the ballots? And I said, you know, if I change my name to Matt the Welder, there's nothing they can do. I've never been more wrong in my life. There is something they can do, and they went ahead and did it. So in the Florida SAVE Act that they came out with earlier this year, they added a nickname or a name amendment. If you've changed your name 365 days before running for office, before the qualifying period, you can't qualify to be a state, local, or federal office in the state of Florida. Now, all of the meat and potatoes of that bill, like the college kids not being able to use their college ID and anything else that they said the bill was supposed to safeguard our elections for, that all took effect January of 2027. But that guy with the name change, he is a real threat to our elections, and we had to make sure as soon as the bill became a law that he was disqualified and couldn't run for office. What they didn't see coming is, as I travel around the state, I sell t-shirts, and I have no money raised from political committees or big companies like Mosaic or any of the real estate developers. It all comes from small dollar donations and selling t-shirts. I was able to raise enough money to hire an attorney and fight back. And as soon as an attorney got involved, the Division of State, the Department of Elections said, hey, we recognize that there's some candidates that have been affected by this new nickname amendment and this new name amendment, and we're going to go ahead and issue a directive where you can still qualify to run for office, but under your previous legal name, which is no longer your legal name. I don't think this has ever been done anywhere else in the United States, probably not even Zimbabwe. This is a true Florida election at this point for this department. And we're back, but under my previous legal name, Matt Taylor. So when you vote Matt Taylor and Matt the Welder takes office, don't be confused. This is what our bureaucracy has come from. And well, some folks say, well, it was silly you changed your name, or that why would you do something like that? To prove how corrupt they are in Tallahassee. If they were able to add a nickname amendment last minute, I changed my name in January of 2026, and in February of 2026, they added that amendment. You could give us growth management laws. You can reform the FWC. You can literally do anything that affects Floridians, that the change that we want. But instead, you showed us that the bureaucracy only works to protect those that are inside the establishment that don't ruffle feathers. Why would the establishment do that? Well, because I'm the most hated man in Tallahassee. But I did something no other person has done in the state of Florida that I can find. I got both sides to agree on something. Okay, the Democrats and the Republicans both said the Welder shouldn't go to Tallahassee. And it's a baby step, but we're making progress. They agreed on something. So we'll take it. And so we went through all that, we fought through all of that, and now I'm back on the ballot. The Commissioner of Agriculture, it's a very powerful position in the state of Florida. Most people just assume it's crops and cattle. It's the Division of Forestry, the Division of Licensing, Office of Energy is underneath of it. The Office of Energy doesn't vote to raise your electric increases. Instead, it helps shape the energy policy with the legislature and the governor. It is the security guard licensing go up underneath there, concealed weapon licensing go underneath there. If you have a sweepstake and the game prize is $5,001, you have to register with the Florida Department of Agriculture. If you have a charity, charities in the state of Florida have to register with the Department of Agriculture. If you have a consumer complaint with maybe a car dealership or a car automotive repair facility, you can file a consumer complaint. If you have bad gasoline, you go to the Department of Agriculture. We should really rename it the Department of pretty much everything. At this point, it does everything in the state of Florida, and it affects so much of our day-to-day lives that most people really don't realize how big that department is. Even the weights and scales. You go to Publix and you put a piece of bacon or something on the scale and it's not right. The Department of Agriculture is who you call. The same thing with gas pumps if they don't start at zero. And you can vote for the Commissioner of Agriculture in the state of Florida. It's Because it's a cabinet position, it votes on our conservation lands. And our conservation land, most notably the $83 million sandbar in Destin that we purchased with our tax dollars that offers no conservation value. It's just a little sandbar with a seawall in front of it. The only person that got anything out of that was the owner of that, whose name is Robert Guidry. Robert Guidry is a prominent GOP donor, and before he was donating to the GOP, he was donating to Democrats like Bill Clinton. And we gave this man $83 million of our tax dollars. He pled guilty to a felony in the state of Louisiana for trying to bribe the Louisiana state governor to get a casino riverboat license. That's not even the worst part of the conservation easements that we have going on in the state of Florida. Have you guys heard of the Project Tango Data Center? It's down in Palm Beach County, but it was kind of controversial, too close to a school, too close to a neighborhood. Folks didn't want it. It turned out they were able to get it to stop. When you look at the two men that are associated with one of the companies called PBA Holdings, both of those men sold conservation easements to the state of Florida. The first guy, the president of that company, sold a $9.8 million 1,000-acre conservation easement called Siboney Ranch to the state of Florida. Now, when you sell a conservation easement, or the state purchases a conservation easement, you're not getting more state parks, you're not getting more forestry land. You're buying the development rights from the land. The land stays private property, but you can't build houses on it unless they surplus it off at a later date, or they find a way to put the development rights back on it. This is who we gave $9.8 million of our tax dollars to. The vice president of PBA Holdings sold a conservation easement to the state of Florida. It was split with Pasco County for $68 million. It's called 4G Ranch. Both of these men donate to my opponent's political committee. Some of that money found its way back through PBA Holdings, through some of the trusts that they own, through some of the other construction companies that they own. But on the outside, it appears the state of Florida is purchasing conservation easements to subsidize data centers. This seems like something only Billy Bob Thornton could dream up in the show that he's Landman, that's the one. So when we start to see the problems of where's the waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can say, why are we buying conservation easements that appear to only reward campaign donors? That's a big question that the bureaucrats can't seem to answer. Like the $83 million sandbar, we should rename Doge to Deals Only Guidry enjoys. Because nobody's called them out on that. The waste, fraud, and abuse, you wonder why developers are able to pave over Florida without any really friction from our local county commissions. Well, we need to refinance or re-amend our campaign finance laws. Right now, you can go, it's probably Pat Neal down this way. I'm sure Pat Neal's probably not a likable character in this room. So when you get up towards like Hillsborough County, we have a guy named Jeffrey Hills of Eisenhower Property Group. He donates $25,000 to 4 out of 7 county commissioners in Hillsborough County. And I'm sure Pat Neal does it down here. Up there in Escambia County, Robert Guidry, the same guy with the sandbar, he does it for Escambia County. The way the campaign finance laws are written for the local level is you can give $1,000 to a candidate. If you're married, your spouse can give $1,000. If you have a business, the business can donate $1,000. If you have 25 LLCs, you can legally donate $25,000 to everybody on your local board of county commissioners. And that's buying preferential treatment, like allowing them to bring water utilities into the rural boundaries, letting them move those rural boundaries back like it's just an imaginary line. And when you wonder, what's the current ag commissioner doing about it? How come he's not speaking up on this? Well, it turns out he's a real estate developer that identifies as a chicken farmer. He owns a few companies, WSNB, Belly Wadding, LLC, up in Pasco County. He's hooked in with a family called the Maggards, who has State Representative Randy Maggard, and Randy Maggard is actively seeking to remove pollution controls from your local government. So where you couldn't, your local government wouldn't be able to make rules about water quality, water quantity, or pollution that's being discharged into our waterways. And I can only imagine it's because currently the Maggard family is trying to get Dade City to annex in about 92 acres of land into Dade City so they could bring the water to it. There is reasons that you can deny growth if you don't have the infrastructure in place, and some cities in the state of Florida have already done it, like Ashtabula up there, I probably butchered that name, up in Lake County. They said no, and it didn't stop growth automatically. What it did is, if you're building 200 houses or more, you can't build those houses in that city. You're not going to be able to annex the land in that city because that city recognized that they didn't have the infrastructure in place to support all of that growth. We need to send representatives in state cabinet positions up to Tallahassee that will fight to bring back our growth management laws that we used to have in this state. The 1985 Growth Management Act required concurrency in infrastructure before development. And in 2011, it got gutted, and Rick Scott took away our growth management laws, basically. It got overshadowed by the BP oil spill. Not many people talk about it. So when folks go, why are we approving all of this growth when we know the interstates can't handle it? Right now, there's no guardrails. You can just keep building, 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 and building. Very few folks want to go to Tallahassee and fight against the machine. I run on a very simple principle. Some Republicans don't like me for this, but how can you call yourself America first, Florida first, or even Sarasota first if you can't call out corruption in your own party? By definition, your party first, and I only work for Florida. So if calling out corruption makes me the bad guy, well then I'll be the bad guy, and they can run their smear campaigns and everything else. But the one thing we're proving in this election is that Floridians want more than smear campaigns and political advertisements. We want to send people to Tallahassee that will work for us. When I started this campaign, people said, are you crazy? That guy's got $33 million. He's gonna just, absolutely, the media won't even cover you or talk to you. He spent almost $9 million trying to defeat me. Somebody brought his advertisements today and handed it to him. So $9 million doesn't do any bit of good if you're trying to push divisional politics onto people. As Ag Commissioner, I would like to see the state of Florida lead the nation in regional slaughterhouses. Right now, they say the only way to lower the price of beef at the supermarket is to import Argentinian beef, but there's only 4 slaughterhouses that slaughter 85% of the beef in the United States. When you bring in that Argentinian beef, you're going to put the American rancher out of business, and then you're going to jack the price of beef right back up and bulldoze all of that agriculture land for cookie cutter houses, data center, and whatever kind of 15-minute community that they're looking to build. If we lose the ability to feed ourselves, the mighty United States of America that we know and love today is gone. Because if you're reliant on somebody else for your food, you're done. Putting agriculture protections on our land to keep that rule boundary. The only people that should be able to push to have that rule boundary move is the people who live inside of the rule boundaries. Not the folks in Tampa, not the folks in another state that are trying to build houses that nobody here in the state of Florida wants. There's not a lot of people talking about the citrus industry right now in Florida. 90% of our citrus crop is gone. The insect that carries citrus greening is called the Asian citrus psyllid. It came from Asia, and in 20 years it's taken out 90% of Florida's citrus. They have now found that insect and the disease, the bacteria, out there in California. And when they find it on a citrus tree, they destroy every grove in a 5-mile radius. Every single tree goes down. It's no longer a Florida problem. We have found the Asian citrus psyllid in Brazil as well. And in Brazil, they tried spraying pesticides 46 times a year out there on the groves to get control of that insect. And what they found is that the insect is resistant to pesticides. Instead of the numbers going down, it went up. But all of that fruit you brought in, what is that with all that pesticide on it? It gets absorbed into the fruit. And that's another problem when you start bringing in food products from other nations. We now don't know what our food looks like, what they're putting on it. And in the case of the Argentinian beef, they've already had a recall on it, telling people to go ahead and take it back if it's been sold or you purchased it from this store. So the problems that face Florida and the nation aren't just go along what's best for our party. Yeah, we're going to get the price of beef by bringing in foreign beef. We should be doing everything we can to help our American ranchers here in the United States. The only way to lower the price of beef or the price of anything is to open our free markets and let free markets do what they do best. More options for consumers will go ahead and bring the prices down, but when you only have Walmart, Publix, Winn-Dixie to go and purchase your produce and your beef and your food from, that's the whole problem we're having in this country right now, is they are taking and monopolizing our food system and making us reliant on a system where you're not actually going to see the farmers, you're not actually going to see the local butcher, and you're buying a subpar product. Florida has 12 state farmers markets. There's one in Plant City. I'm not sure what the closest one is to here. Pardon my ignorance on that. I keep a lot in my head, but that's not one of the things I had with me today. So we should open up those farmers markets and encourage restaurants to be able to go and purchase fresh from Florida food, get it in our schools as well, and break away from Cisco. Going out to eat today is who makes the best Cisco. But we have to send people to Tallahassee that will not just push for this, not just talk about it, but actually deliver results. And there's a lot of folks in Tallahassee that said, look, we will work with you, only if you get elected though, because please don't tell anybody who we are that is helping you right now. We like what you're doing. But you got to get in office for us to come out and actually get on board with you. Some of the stuff that I get sent to me is coming right out of Tallahassee with state representatives, state senators that are upset with the current status quo, that are saying, hey, this guy did this. The name change thing was one of the ways. It was a Tallahassee insider. When they were going to take me off the ballot, I was getting text messages from somebody inside the Capitol saying they're putting this bill in, it has the effective date is as soon as it becomes a law. They have no idea how I'm able to get some of the information out of these folks. But you never know, being a blue-collar worker, so many people look down on you. You never know who I might have washed your dirty dishes or mopped your floor with. So because of all of that, I have ears just about everywhere across the state, and so many people send me stuff, and that's how we get like the current agriculture commissioner having a private concert series meeting with campaign donors who have contributed $200,000 from big Fortune 500 companies on his private property. Somebody took that from inside the private property and sent it to me. His own compound isn't even safe. But that's what happens when we the people work together. If your state rep, your county commissioner, if they're trying to divide you with DC divisional talking politics, find a county commissioner, find a state rep that understands the problems that are powerfully unique to the state of Florida. Because just like the state is unique, so are the problems. Right now, it's water use. What are we going to do for more water? We're running out of water, overdevelopment, and we keep having county commissioners and the corruption that nobody wants to call out. And if you can't find somebody that will run for county commissioner or state rep, get out there and run yourself. It's so easy, even a welder can do it. And when you get out there in August to vote, that's the biggest thing, is not just get out there, but encourage your neighbors, encourage your co-workers, whoever, to get out there and vote. Don't tell them how to vote. If your neighbor's a Democrat, you can argue till you're blue in the face, you're not going to change their mind. Same thing with your mother-in-law or anybody else. If they vote differently than you, that's fine. At the end of the day, we can all agree the world needs less Mitch McConnells, less Nancy Pelosi's, less Chuck Schumer's, and less Wilton Simpsons. Don't ruin your family dinner. Don't argue over me or anybody else at your family dinner. There's better ways to ruin a family dinner. Alcohol works really well. The next morning, you can't remember what you're mad at. You just want them to quietly pass the antidote. You guys got any questions for me?
Over here, use the microphone here, please. Everybody use this microphone.
The Commissioner of Agriculture controls the concealed weapon licensing now. There's a national movement to try and get open carry. What's your stance on both of those? Because some of the past Commissioner of Agriculture have really thrown a monkey wrench into trying to get that issue straightened out.
I think we have open carry finally statewide. It took a lawsuit and a lot of time to get it, but we finally got open carry. As far as what's my stance on the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed, is pretty cut and dry. And then people say, well, what about the militia part? When you read the militia part, and then I ask, well, what is a militia that's unarmed? At that point, you're an HOA with a lot cooler name. Right.
Thanks, Pat. You mentioned the word concurrency, and after I discovered the definition of infrastructure concurrency, I've been a proponent of that for a long time. What could you do realistically as Commissioner of Agriculture enforce the concurrency of support infrastructure and at least slow down, if not stop the development of our wetlands and our pristine natural lands in the state of Florida.
So the Department of Agriculture has 4 lobbyists that work in-house for it. It's our tax money, it's our lobbyists. We should be able to use them however we see fit. And because the Department of Agriculture is the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is a pretty broad stretch that affects everything. As far as what can we do to slow the growth, we should amend our broken greenbelt laws. Right now in the state of Florida, if you are trying to develop a piece of property and you put cattle or anything greenbelt, and it could be a lease, say I own a piece of land or vice versa, and we draw up a lease agreement for $1, you don't have to show that you're an agriculture operation making money. You just have to show that you're an agriculture operation that's a business that's bringing in money, even if it's at a loss. The developers that ideal have mastered the system. He purchased a piece of property down this way for $2.2 million, got greenbelt on it. It was $1,200 a year in taxes because of this greenbelt. So if we amend our broken greenbelt laws, we'll do 2 things. We'll bring in revenue for no property tax or homestead exemption. Because right now when we ask the bureaucrat, how do you fund no property tax or homestead exemption? You go, oh, no, we're going to cut taxes. But we see the waste, fraud, and abuse on the outside, nobody's cutting it. So we amend our broken greenbelt laws. And we amend our broken greenbelt laws to bring in money, but also developers wouldn't have the, not the right word here, the reasons to hoard on to thousands of acres of land while they're trying to get it pulled for developments and get it rezoned and all that stuff. And then on the flip side, we need to bring back the 1985 Growth Management Act. When they got rid of the Department of Community Affairs, it sounds very authoritarian, the DCA, they basically gutted the 1985 Growth Management Act. So if we brought back the Department of Community Affairs and revived the 1985 Growth Management laws that we had, was the legislature's fix in the 70s, because we faced the same problems in the 70s, overdevelopment, no infrastructure, and their answer was the 1985 Growth Management Act. If we revive that, I think you would see a lot of the growth, the unprecedented overdevelopment growth come to a grinding halt. When they brought in the 1985 Growth Management Act originally, they had to submit it to that state, I don't know what you call it, institution or agency, whatever you want to call it. And when they had to submit it there, a lot of the counties couldn't pass to get their approvals. So right now, when you have county commissioners just ready to approve, at this point there needs to be some sort of other oversight over top of that, because we turn out, the other thing that the Department of Community Affairs and the Growth Management Act did is it encouraged participation in your neighborhood. So if this entire room turned out at a meeting and you guys pushed back against the project, they were supposed to take that into consideration. Right now, you guys turn out to a project or anywhere across the state of Florida, like Fort Meade, the entire room was packed, and they still approved the data center anyways. But because Fort Meade was a charter big city, now they're talking about recalling the Fort Meade commissioners that approved it. We're gonna
Local vote.
yeah, our home rule. The other thing I would like to take, there's 2 other agriculture laws that should be one amended and the other repealed. Have you guys ever heard of the agriculture enclave law that just came out? So the agriculture enclave law, that you have houses around a piece of agriculture land, and they go ahead and try to get development on that piece of agriculture land, but it's consistent or it checks all of the boxes of the agriculture enclave law, they don't even have to give you a public meeting anymore. They can get it just bypassed right through. That's one I saw, I think it was St. Johns County, that when the county commissioners saw, they're always late to the game. I tried to call it out before they got it to the legislature, but now they're like, it took away our home rule, what are we gonna do? The Bert Harris Jr. Act, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Bert Harris Jr. Act here. That was Bert Harris Jr. was a farmer, and he designed that law to try to help farmers. Like if you brought in a mess of cattle and they just got weaned and they're paying for mama and your neighbor from up north didn't like it, you called code enforcement for noise and sheriff. Under the Bert Harris Jr. Act, you weren't supposed to be able to tell somebody what they can do to make money on their private property. But just like SB 180, because it doesn't say for bona fide agriculture use, or it's so broad, developers have interpreted that as if you do not grant us density, if you do not grant us maximum zoning, we're going to sue you under the Bert Harris Act. And when you have a Bert Harris Act lawsuit and you lose, it costs all of us taxpayers money, because if they lose that denial, they have to pay the damages to the developer. So we should amend the Bert Harris Act and add for bona fide agricultural use. We should be pushing to remove the
Probably everybody here has heard in the news about the spraying of glyphosate on our agricultural lands, how widespread it is nationally. In Florida, I believe that it is, I've also read articles about it's being used on all the lands, even in Florida, even though I think there probably was a lot of blowback. However, President Trump has recently issued an executive order saying that not only should it not be banned, but that it should be encouraged, and that the FDA and the governing agencies in the country will be able to require that subsidies be offered to the Monsanto Bayer in order to produce it more economically so that it can be used more widespread. This is all bothersome to Robert Kennedy, who is the proponent of MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again movement. How do you think, what is going on here in Florida to protect citizens from the possible poisoning of pesticides such as Roundup and paraquat? Is that another?
Paraquat's a pretty nasty one, yeah.
Yeah, these things are getting into our food supply. Are we doing anything about it, or can we do anything about it in the state of Florida through the Office of the Department of Agriculture?
Sure thing. So, to answer your question, we just turn a blind eye to what the pesticides, the dangers that come with them in the state of Florida. At the Fish and Wildlife Commission, they're spraying glyphosate, 2,4-D, dichloromide directly into our waterways to try to control invasive aquatic plants. I would like to see Florida push more towards regenerative agriculture. It would help our environment, help our lands, help the nutrient pollution in our waterways. We should be setting up ways to help transition farmers. I think if you cut off glyphosate right away for farmers, they would find it very difficult to have you switch over. So we need to set up programs to how to train farmers to get towards the regenerative stuff. I know there's some biological stuff out there that become much better than fertilizer. What can the Department of Agriculture do? The Department of Agriculture has a very unique ability in the state of Florida. Under the Florida pesticide law, the Department of Agriculture by rule can go ahead and prohibit the sale of anything shown to be detrimental to humans or the environment.
Which would be
a lot of the chemical sprays, yes. So like paraquat is a restricted use pesticide in the state of Florida, but it is some nasty stuff. And they've known since like the 50s that it's something, back when it was Chevron, now it's Syngenta. And Syngenta, I think they just started to say they're going to prohibit making, and they're not going to make it anymore because they got undercut. Syngenta is actually owned by ChemChina. Some of these chemicals are actually owned by ChemChina under the ruse of Syngenta, which is headquartered in Switzerland. So the very country that Syngenta is headquartered in Europe, they won't allow a lot of these chemicals to be sprayed. And when it comes to paraquat specifically, Anna Polina has tried to introduce a bill that to prohibit it across the United States. They've already banned it in Vermont. But you have farmers in the state of Florida that are reporting neurological problems, brain issues. They get Parkinson-like syndrome where they shake afterwards. The Department of Agriculture should not register that chemical right away. And the Department of Ag has a very unique ability to leave some for terrestrial uses like on fields and then some for the aquatic use. Right now there's 17 aquatic chemicals that they're spraying in our waterway, and some people say, well, you have to show that it's having an adverse health effect on the environment or the animal. Glyphosate specifically, the Fish and Wildlife Commission is spraying into our waterways. Glyphosate has been shown to compound cold stress and affect the renal systems of manatees, according to the University of Florida Veterinary Science. Dichloromide, which is another one that's owned by Syngenta, was linked to eagle deaths in 1994. They call it the eagle killer. It's avian ventricular melanopathy, or AVM for short. And they brought it down here and they tried some stuff with the snail kites. It's a very endangered bird in the state of Florida. And they were able to get it to bioaccumulate up and theorize that, yeah, I could kill snail kites. And the reason why we're not seeing a lot of dead snail kites is just not as plentiful as like the eagles are. So there's reasons to start registering a lot of these chemicals that they're spraying in our waterways. When they spray them in our waterways, it does unspeakable damage. Besides, like detrimental is nothing compared to when you actually go out there and see it. When you spray the herbicides in our waterway and you kill that aquatic vegetation, it turns into compost and it feeds the algae blooms. And the algae blooms explode and it destroys the fishery. And it goes ahead and causes the blue-green algae just to spread all across the lake. What is the solution? The solution is mechanical harvest. And you can't just take the stuff to the landfill. You need a mechanical harvest. We have the machines. I've seen them. They're like 90, 100 foot that can pull the stuff out of the waterways. What we don't have is the infrastructure in place of what do you do with the invasive plants once you get them out of the waterway. But you can take the invasive plants, take the cellulose out of them, turn it into plastic, single-use plastic. Right now they're out on paper straw. They're making people drink paper straws like down in Cape Coral or whatever because they don't want the turtles to die with the straws in their nose. Well, the plastic from plants decomposes in like a couple of months. The longer stuff that you use, so like your shipping packages and all that stuff, you can turn that into plastic. And on the agriculture side, when you look at row crops like strawberries, they have to put plastic on the rows to keep the weeds and stuff from growing in. Well, when they're done with that plastic, they pull that single-use plastic off, get it out there to turn rows, and they light it on fire right in the middle of the field. If you were to take that and introduce a plastic that's made with these aquatic invasive plants, and you get them onto those rows, the row crops out there, when it decomposes, it would actually feed the plants, like it would help them build their soil. So right now, if you can offer a $150 billion deal for a data center, like a tax cut, why can't you offer a massive tax cut to a company that wants to come in and find something to do with these aquatic plants so we can stop spraying pesticides in our waterways?
I have one follow-up question. This would probably be easy.
Sometimes.
The rationale that I've heard proposed by the people who are supporting the Trump's glyphosate production use. They argue, is it a reasonable argument to say that if we don't use those things, then we would suffer severe production cutbacks on our agricultural products as a result?
I think the way to get off of glyphosate is it has to be weaned at this point because they've grown corn where you can go out there and spray glyphosate on it. It'll kill everything else around that corn except for the corn. So they've actually modified some of the plants to grow before the chemical. Just like there's a military industrial complex, there's an agriculture chemical complex in the United States as well, and they have to sell you a product. So getting them to break away from that product, or to break away from that, we got to sell you this mentality. Same thing with like Mosaic and the phosphate industry. When Piney Point leaked, that was a phosphogypsum stack. That was industrial waste from the phosphate industry. It's very nutrient rich and it's spilled into our waterways. Those plants, the very plants that we're spraying the pesticides on, and invasive plants, you can turn them into fertilizer. You can compost them. You can do a number of things with them. But right now, the current status quo, just like you said, well, we're stuck on this way of thinking. Well, we knew that the DDT was killing off the eagles, and we were told when it came out it was safe. We were told asbestos was a miracle mineral, and that gave us cancer. I mean, they were putting asbestos in cigarette filters at one time back in the 50s. If we would just ignore the science like we're doing now, we would still be smoking asbestos cigarettes and spraying DDT. So I think the hardest part is how do you break away from the chemical lobbyists? And when we start sending people that don't take any money, not just to Tallahassee, but to DC as well, he who sends the most money has sold his soul. I think Confucius said that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Well, welcome and thank you for coming. I have two questions. One, I got this flyer yesterday in the mail. Maybe some of you did from your opponent, Wilson Simpson, a big one. And two questions. One, he says he's preserved nearly 300,000 acres of fireland from overdevelopment. Like, that's pretty good. He's created a wildlife corridor preserving 18 million acres, including 230,000 acres for working farmlands. Is that true? Has he done that? And my second question is, China has been reported buying land. Has China or any other foreign country purchased farmland in Florida recently, and what's the current status on that?
We'll do the last one about China and the foreign
Yeah.
countries, because I just know it off the top of my head from Hillsborough County. There's property off Charlie Taylor in Midway Road. They're gonna put, I think, 2,400 houses on 1,200 acres, so it's gonna go from Charlie Taylor up to I-4. When you look at who owns the land, it's owned by a company called Walton Global or Walton Acquisition. When you go, what's that? When you look at Walton Global and Walton Acquisition, it's a Canadian real estate investment company. And it's not just Florida, it's all across the state. They like the American market because our real estate market is more stable than the rest of the world. So when you look at who the investors are, and this is all on their website, you go through and you see like where their offices are around the world. There's one in Hong Kong, there's one in Dubai, there's one in Taiwan. So did they prohibit the Chinese from coming in directly? Yes. But are the Chinese going through the Canadians, buying our agriculture land and then turning it into cookie-cutter houses? Yes. So the Chinese are still doing it. The other countries are still doing it. They're just going through Canada first because they didn't prohibit Canada from coming in and purchasing our agriculture land.
So I think if it wasn't for people like you who know them, the average person in this room is not going to be able to go and research that. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention. Now, what about the acres, 300,000 acres of farmland and 18 million acres of preserving for Florida wildlife?
So the wildlife quarter, he likes to say he's the grandfather of conservation. He's actually the grandfather of subdivisions, and a lot of that was under Putnam, but Putnam didn't get approved, and for whatever reason, Nicky Freed didn't get it approved. So when Simpson came in, he was able to get it approved. So as far as like creative program, stuff like that, the program's already in existence. A lot of that land was under Putnam and then under Nicky Freed, and Freed, for whatever reason, didn't push the land like he's doing. Kind of a half-truth, I would say. Like, it wasn't like the latest donor, the latest 3 parcels of land, not just 4G, 7A, I think it's citrus, something or another. They've all been owners. So if that program was, for that program to work, you have to be registered in the best management practices, which is like controlling your runoff and stuff like that for a year. You look at Keith Crew, he got some property through that Rural and Family Land Acquisition Program, but he was in the best management practice for a year. Keith Crew is a state representative, I forget where, state rep or state senator in the state of Florida here. So we're rewarding campaign owners, we're rewarding other bureaucrats. The program has the potential to save a lot of agricultural land, but you should save farmers that have that are on the risk of selling their land for development. If you're selling land out to somebody that's trying to build a data center down in Palm Beach County that has, like the one guy, 4G, is owned by Phillips and Jordan, that was a big construction company all the way in Tennessee. He was looking to sell that land. That land couldn't be sold because it was all kind of wetlands, and the people around it said it was kind of contaminated from the dumping stuff out that way. So there's a lot of like, when you start to look at the Rural and Family Lands Acquisition Program, why are the donors the only ones getting approvals on that piece of property? Why aren't we saving farms that are on the brink of being lost that haven't contributed to any political committee? I think the way we fix it is we prohibit anybody who has donated to any politician from getting money from that program of land. That's the only way to bring oversight to it.
I hope it happens.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Yes, sir.
I first found out who Wilton Simpson was because his office tried to introduce a rule change that would redefine dressed poultry sold by small farmers as something that has to have the head and the feet and the visceral attached. And that would put so many small chicken meat farmers out of business. And I heard you oppose that. And I want to thank you for that. And that's when I figured out that we didn't have an agricultural commission that was here for farmers.
Yeah.
So I also want to thank you for supporting the Prime Act for Beef. And as a homesteader and a lot of friends here in Sarasota County who are homesteaders, I want to ask you, what your thoughts are on helping to support homesteaders, small farmers, small businesses. We've actually got pretty good cottage food industry laws here in Florida. I come from Idaho, much better than Idaho. But still, there's a lot of restrictions. We can't do fermented food. There's a lot of restrictions on meat and milk. I just wonder what your thoughts are in supporting the small farmers and homesteads.
I think like the cottage laws, like if you're buying raw milk, if it's labeled correctly and it says it's raw milk, and it's, as long as it's in the label, you should be able to buy raw milk. I mean, the consumer at the end of the day should be able to purchase what he or she desires. Now, could it give you an adverse health effect or something? Anything can. I mean, look at the lettuce from Taco Bell. You want to be exempted from still eat Taco Bell. So there's always a risk with all food products. And our cottage laws, like you said, they are pretty decent, but there's still a number of folks that have said, hey, they can still use a little tweaking. And I think when you have big agriculture like when Simpson sold his chicken farm, he sold it to Cal-Maine. So when you have big outside industries coming in that are winning over the ears of our bureaucrats, we have to send somebody to Tallahassee, and not just Tallahassee, but DC as well, that understands that farmers buy everything at retail and sell everything basically at wholesale. And if there's any way that they can come in and purchase something directly from the farmer, that's the only way that the small farms are going to make it. And if our small farms actually can sustain, make it through this urban storm, we wouldn't need to be purchasing so much conservation land through the Rural and Family Lands Acquisition Program. If our farmers are doing good and our farmers are able to hold on their land without having to sell the development rights to the farmer, we could take that Rural and Family Land Acquisition Program and purchase actual state forestry land where the public is able to go out there, hunt, fish, hike, and enjoy the land that they're taxed on to purchase.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Matt, yes, you can.